A massive killer whale lay stranded on the shore, gasping for life. The crowd gathered, desperate to help, but what happened next was beyond anyone's imagination. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when the first beachgoers arrived, expecting nothing more than a peaceful morning by the sea. But instead of gentle waves and scattered seashells, they were met with a sight that sent shivers down their spines. A massive killer whale, beached on the shore, its slick black and white body motionless against the golden sand. A young boy was the first to notice it. "Mom, look," he cried, pointing toward the enormous creature. His voice trembled with both excitement and fear. Within moments, more people gathered, drawn by the sheer size of the stranded giant. The orca's powerful tail gave a weak, sluggish movement, sending a small cloud of sand into the air. Its sides heaved with labored breaths, eyes dark and glossy, reflecting the morning light. A deep, sorrowful sound escaped its throat, a haunting call that sent chills through the crowd. Panic rippled through the onlookers. Some scrambled to call the authorities, voices shaking as they relayed the emergency. Others hesitated, unsure whether approaching would help or cause more harm. The whale, despite its size, looked incredibly vulnerable. Then came the biggest question of all. Could they save it? And if so, how much time did they have before it was too late? The situation was growing more desperate by the minute. The rising sun cast a harsh glare over the beach, and the once cool morning air was quickly heating up. The killer whale, still trapped on the sand, let out another low, sorrowful sound, a deep, almost pleading vocalization. Could it be calling for help? By now, word had spread across the small coastal town, and the community rushed to the scene. Dozens of volunteers arrived, carrying buckets, towels, and anything they could use to keep the massive animal hydrated. "Keep the skin wet. It needs moisture, or it'll overheat," one man shouted, splashing another bucket of seawater over the orca's glistening back. Others followed suit, forming a line from the waves to the whale, passing buckets like a well-rehearsed team. Some braver individuals attempted to dig around the massive creature, hoping to carve out a shallow trench leading back to the water. But the sand was unforgiving. Each scoop seemed to collapse back into place, making their efforts painfully slow. Just when hope seemed to flicker, a group of marine biologists arrived, weaving their way through the growing crowd. Their faces were serious. They had seen cases like this before. "She's in danger of dehydration and sunburn," one of them warned, kneeling beside the whale to assess her condition. Killer whales aren't meant to support their own weight on land. The longer she stays like this, the more pressure builds on her organs. A heavy silence fell over the rescuers. They had been fighting against time without realizing just how little of it they had. One of the biologists placed a hand gently on the whale's side. "We have to act fast," she said. "But she's still strong. I can feel her muscles tensing. She's fighting to survive." Another soft vocalization escaped the whale's throat, this time quieter, more strained. The onlookers exchanged nervous glances. Could she sense her pod nearby, or was she simply pleading for a miracle? With renewed determination, the team doubled down on their efforts. Every second counted. But the real challenge was yet to come. How would they move a 6-ton animal back into the ocean before it was too late? The rescue effort was relentless, but the reality of the situation loomed over everyone. This whale was simply too massive to move by human strength alone. A few strong volunteers pushed against its slick, rubbery skin, trying to shift its weight even slightly. But at nearly 6 tons, the sheer size of the animal made it feel like an impossible task. The sand beneath it had molded to its form, creating a natural trap that held it firmly in place. "The tide's still hours away," one of the marine biologists muttered, checking their watch. "We don't have that long." The crowd, now larger than ever, murmured in unease. Every passing second felt like a countdown to disaster. Desperate for another solution, a group of rescuers hurried to secure a tow line to a nearby boat. The plan? To gently pull the whale closer to the water. It was risky, but they were out of options. With the rope tied, the boat's engine roared to life. Slowly, it moved forward, the tension in the line growing as it strained against the whale's immense weight. For a moment, it seemed like it might work. The whale's body shifted ever so slightly. A few hopeful gasps rippled through the crowd. Then, snap! The tow line snapped under the pressure, whipping dangerously through the air. The force sent a spray of sand into the air, and for a moment, silence followed. Then came the real horror. The whale barely moved. People stepped forward in alarm. Had the attempt hurt it? The marine biologists rushed in, scanning its body for any signs of injury. And then, the most gut-wrenching sign of all, the whale's breathing, which had been strong and labored before, was now weaker. Its sides rose and fell in shallow, uneven movements. "She's struggling," one of the experts whispered, placing a hand on the whale's side. The usual firmness of its muscles had slackened. The exhaustion was setting in. The crowd watched, helpless. The whale had fought so hard, and yet time was still against them. Someone in the crowd finally voiced the question on everyone's mind. What if we can't save her? A cold wave of fear swept through the beach. They had done everything they could, but was it enough? The weight of the situation pressed down on everyone like the relentless sun overhead. The whale's breathing was growing weaker, its energy fading fast. They had to act now. "We need to keep it cool," a marine biologist shouted, scanning the worried faces around her. "If it overheats, it won't survive until high tide." Without hesitation, people scrambled to bring every available wet sheet, towel, and cloth they could find. Volunteers soaked them in buckets of seawater and carefully draped them over the whale's smooth, dark skin. Others rushed back and forth with anything that could hold water. Buckets, bottles, even cupped hands, desperately pouring cool water over the helpless creature. Meanwhile, another team began digging a trench between the stranded whale and the incoming tide. If they could create a channel, water might slowly reach the whale, easing its suffering. But the sand was heavy, wet, dense, and unforgiving. For every handful of earth removed, more collapsed back into place. Sweat mixed with sand as rescuers pushed through the exhaustion, their arms burning, their breathing ragged. Despite their best efforts, the whale's movements were slowing. Its once strong vocalizations had faded into soft, barely audible clicks. It wasn't just physically trapped. It was losing hope. In the crowd, emotions ran high. Some people clutched their hands together in silent prayers. Others fought back tears. A few turned away, unable to watch what seemed like an inevitable tragedy. "This can't be it," one of the rescuers muttered under his breath, staring at the massive, majestic creature before him. Not like this. But as the minutes ticked by, doubt crept in. Had they arrived too late? Were they simply delaying the inevitable, just when it seemed all hope was slipping away? A voice shouted from the shore, "Look, the tide!" Heads whipped toward the horizon. The ocean was rising. Slowly but surely, the waves were coming in. A renewed sense of determination surged through the crowd. Maybe, just maybe, there was still time. But even with the tide coming in, one question remained. Would it be enough to save the whale before it was too late? As the tide rises higher, the rescuers feel a renewed sense of determination. They work in unison, their hands pushing against the slick, rubbery skin of the massive creature. The killer whale, once motionless, begins to respond, its powerful muscles twitching as if understanding the human's efforts. Cheers erupt from the crowd as the water reaches the whale's belly. The ocean, now working with the rescuers instead of against them, gently lifts the creature. Volunteers guide it carefully, ensuring it doesn't thrash in panic. The whale lets out a long, deep sound, a noise that many believe is a sign of relief. Then, in one incredible moment, the whale makes a final push. With a mighty flick of its tail, it surges forward into deeper water. The crowd holds its breath as the enormous creature glides through the waves. For a brief moment, the whale pauses as if hesitating. Then, to everyone's amazement, it breaches, launching itself into the air before crashing back into the sea. It was a moment none would forget. The whale, now free, disappears beneath the waves, leaving behind only a trail of ripples. The rescuers, exhausted but victorious, embrace one another. Strangers who had come together for a single cause now share an unbreakable bond. As the sun begins to set, the last sight of the whale's dorsal fin fades into the distance. A deep silence falls over the beach, not of sadness, but of awe. Today, humans and nature had worked together, proving that even the most impossible challenges can be overcome. As the killer whale glides into the deeper waters, the tension on the beach dissolves into pure joy. People erupt into cheers, some throwing their hands in the air, while others hug the strangers they had spent hours fighting alongside. A few wipe away tears, overwhelmed by the incredible moment they just witnessed. But just as the crowd begins to settle, the ocean stirs once more. A collective gasp echoes across the shore as the whale, instead of disappearing into the vast sea, turns back toward them. For a brief moment, it lingers near the surface, its sleek, black dorsal fin cutting through the waves. Then, without warning, it launches itself into the air. The massive creature breaches the water in a breathtaking display, twisting slightly before crashing back down in an explosion of white foam. A second later, it does it again, this time even higher. The crowd watches in stunned silence before bursting into laughter and cheers. It feels almost as if the whale is celebrating alongside them, offering a final farewell, a message of gratitude. People pull out their phones, desperate to capture the miraculous moment. Children jump up and down, pointing excitedly. Even the exhausted rescuers, drained from the hours of effort, stand in awe, their fatigue momentarily forgotten. One final time, the whale rises from the water, its colossal body defying gravity before plunging back into the ocean's embrace. A final wave ripples toward the shore, and then it's gone. The beach falls quiet again, but this time it's different. No longer filled with fear or worry, the silence holds something else, a deep sense of connection. This wasn't just an animal rescue, it was something greater, something magical. As the sun dips lower on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, people slowly begin to leave, carrying with them a story they will tell for the rest of their lives. As the waves settled and the crowd slowly dispersed, a profound silence lingered in the air. People stood still, absorbing the gravity of what they had just witnessed. It wasn't just a rescue, it was a testament to the power of unity, compassion, and determination. Marine biologists later explain that such successful rescues are incredibly rare. A beached killer whale often suffers internal injuries, dehydration, and stress, making survival uncertain. Yet, against all odds, this one had made it back to the ocean, alive and thriving. News of the rescue spread like wildfire. Videos of the whale's triumphant return went viral, touching hearts across the globe. Messages of admiration flooded social media, praising the bravery of the rescuers and the resilience of the creature. For those who were there, the experience was life-changing. Many had arrived at the beach expecting an ordinary day, but left with a newfound appreciation for the delicate balance between humanity and nature. The whale's final jumps felt like a message, one of gratitude, hope, and an unspoken connection between species. Long after the event, people continued to share their stories, ensuring this incredible moment would never be forgotten.